Hi, I am Erika T. Wurth. I have really big hair, and I'm going to read you a short story that became a novel and that is going to be published in fall 2014. Crazyhorse's girlfriend. Jack, he says he's not like other Indians. He's got hair like wild horses and long, rough fingers, strong, and very brown. Jack was always talking about how he used to try to help other Indians, but that he was sick and tired of dealing with the poor. He'd done what he could, and he was done. He was my friend Gina's roommate. Gina's this girl from the Navajo res who was living with him and his cousin Megan and her baby in a crappy 3-bedroom on Colfax when I met him. The baby cried all the time. Serious, Gina wanted to pop one out before she moved in with them, and after a year, she started calling the baby birth control. Jack could be so sweet with the baby, though. He would even change her diapers. Sometimes Megan would get so tired from her job and the baby that she'd fall asleep in front of the TV while she was breastfeeding. Her head would just roll back into the couch. Sometimes when I'd yell for Megan to take the baby, Jack would come. He'd gather her up in his arms and sing to her in Lakota. We all loved Jack at first. One time we came home and he was sitting there in the dark watching TV as usual. Megan took one look at him and then walked past him and turned on all the lights. He just blinked and looked up at her like he'd been sitting there for years with the lights out and the TV on. And Megan looked back at him for a long time. Finally, Jack licked his lips and coughed and was like, "What?" He had on this old t-shirt and jeans that looked like they'd been through the gutter about 50 times over and not washed once. But he looked good. He was the kind of guy who could sleep in a paper sack for 4 days and never shower and come out looking like some kind of model. He always smelled nice too, like sweet grass and fry bread and some hot-smelling cologne. So Megan kept staring at Jack and not answering him, and Jack kept staring back at Megan until finally he coughed and was like, "Megan, what?" Gina and I looked at each other and I couldn't help it. I mouthed, "Oh no." And then we looked at Megan and Megan said, "Where you been?" Jack just looked at her all innocent and then said, "Look, Megan, I never asked you where you and the intertribal posse been, so why are you asking me?" Megan's lips tightened and she said, "I don't really care where you've been, though I don't disappear for 2 days straight. But not only have you not given me the money for rent, but your dad keeps calling. What do you want me to tell the only uncle who cared for me where his son has been for 2 days? Then Megan stopped talking and for a second crossed her arms and looked hard at him, because I could tell him something, she said, and then Jack started to look real uncomfortable. "I could tell him something about who you spend your time with." Gina and I looked at each other and then at Jack, and Jack just started pulling his hands through that thick black hair of his eyes on the floor. Megan stared at him for a couple more minutes, and then she just sighed real long and hard and said, "Look, Jack, just give me the rent money." Then, of course, he said, "I will when I get a job, okay?" "Oh, Jesus, Jack, Jesus Christ," Megan said, and Jack flinched. He looked off for a second, and then back at her, and then mumbled this word I think means half-breed in Lakota under his breath. "What?" Megan said, and he was silent. Then she said, "Just give me the money." "Why don't you ask Jesus for it?" Jack said. Megan was all silent for a long time, watching Jack, his hair rumpled and his face so beautiful, all twisted up like that. And then she said, "Oh, Jack," and she started to cry, just a little. Jack just sat there with that look on his face, that mean smile that wasn't really a smile at all, and then he kind of slumped a little and lifted the remote all slow and turned up the volume. I looked at Gina and she mouthed, "Let's go," and we both got up and walked out. I'll never forget the last time that me and Gina and Jack went out together. We'd just gone to a movie with one of Jack's new friends, but this time it was different. This one had gone to the movie with us instead of just being a loud voice in Jack's room that waked the baby at 3 a.m. This one was sitting next to Jack on the bus. The guy's name was Miguel, and he was one of those beautiful Mexican guys who looked more Indian than anything, except he had this really wavy hair. He laughed funny too, like a donkey. I remember feeling sorry for him, though, because he kept trying to hold Jack's hand, which was brave because we was on the bus on Colfax, and Jack just kept moving away from Miguel like it wasn't even happening. Then Jack started to talk about home, about one of his cousins, about how his dad caught him and his favorite cousin in an old shed once, and about what happened then. Jack, it's so hard to hate him sometimes. I mean, the guy used to go up to his res to do Sundance, which only the really dedicated guys do. He'd talk about how when all the hippies would camp out on his mom's lawn, he'd go and clear them out, Crazyhorse style. Though Jack ain't no Crazyhorse, maybe Crazyhorse's girlfriend. That was the weirdest thing about Jack. He was always talking about being different from other Indians and getting what whites got, but he didn't care. He also didn't like them whites who were wannabe Indians either. It's like, why did he care? I told him once about this wannabe Indian white girl I knew in high school who was crazy. She thought it was cool that I was Apache, And after high school, she used to hang out at the 7-Eleven until dawn and tell anyone who would listen that she had this picture of her baby and did they want to see it. So one day I was crazy drunk and it was about 2 a.m, and there she was. So I marched up to her and said, "Yeah, I want to see it." Then she pulled out a picture of this dead baby. I guess maybe I know Indians that crazy, but she was one screwed up white girl, I tell you what. So when I told Jack about this, he just said that wasn't the kind of white people he wanted to hang out with. He said with them, he knew it wouldn't be the color of your skin, but your class. And I said, "What do you mean by class?" Then he said, "The kind of people who want good, tasteful things, not trash." I told him nobody wants trash. Nobody. Besides, he doesn't know nothing. My dad was white, and I've lived around whites all my life, and they wouldn't have nothing to do with Jack, the way he talks and acts and how he's like. Not the ones he's talking about anyway. Those white people, those really classy ones who ain't looking for no fake medicine men, they ain't nothing like Jack thinks. Nothing. I always feel sorry for him when I think about that, but it's like I used to listen to Jack and all the stuff that he said that he wanted, cars and houses and that, and I kept thinking, man, you ain't never get that stuff. You're 35 and you've never held one job for more than a month or two and you don't even got a degree. Stupid moron couldn't even pay the rent and kept running the phone bill up, and because of all of that, Megan had to go back home to Pine Ridge because the dad, this Kiowa dude, was in jail and couldn't help them. And I know it was wrong now, but that's why I spit at him that day when Gina and I saw him standing under the underpass with the rest of the urban skins. The last night I ever saw Jack, we was all drunk, and he was trying to get it on with my friend Shane. Then he passed out cold on the couch. I stood over him for a minute, and then went over to my bag, and I started digging through it. I could hear the baby crying in one of the bedrooms, and Megan and Gina and Shane laughing somewhere, so I just kept on digging. It was this great brown and white Pendleton that my old teacher had given me. Finally, I found what I was looking for. I took my eyeliner out and started to draw crazy stuff all over Jack's face, praying to God that he wouldn't wake up. I wrote stuff like, "Kiss me, I'm stupid," and "Here comes the apple." I mean, for Christ's sake, he changed his name from American Horse to Onassis. I sat back in the rocking chair across on that ratty old couch and looked at Jack in the near darkness, admiring my work and laughing, and then I pulled out my lipstick and gave him big, beautiful lips. I could still hear the baby crying and my friends laughing somewhere, but with all that alcohol in my brain, it seemed so distant, meaningless. I just sat there for a long time, waiting for them to come out of the room, and I remember watching him like that. I thought of one more stupid story that he had told me. It was about this dog he'd had when he was a kid on his res. It wasn't even a ratty res dog or nothing. It was this poodle that his dad found wandering the streets in the town off of Pine Ridge. All his little girl cousins wanted the poodle because it looked just like the dogs on TV that all the rich white girls had. But for some reason, that dog just took to Jack like nothing else. It just loved him and curled up with him at night and everything. Then one time, Jack got sick, thought he was going to die, he felt so bad, and that dog wouldn't leave him for nothing, not even to eat. So his dad had to take dog food for the dog into Jack's room until Jack got better. About a year after that, the dog got sick. It was old anyways. So they took the dog to the vet instead of just shooting it because Jack begged, and the vet said the dog was on its last legs, but to leave it overnight so that they could observe it and everything. And Jack just begged his dad to stay, but of course his dad said no. But the worst part is that when they went back the next morning, the dog was dead. Jack told me that he never felt so bad in his life. He said he couldn't believe he had let his father convince him to leave it overnight when that dog didn't leave him for nothing when he was sick. I don't know. I guess I shouldn't have spit at Jack that day. I mean, when I spit at him, it landed right in his face. I remember he looked up at me and then at the ground, the same way he did when those boys from Pine Ridge kept calling him a homo that day at powwow. I was thinking about all of that when Gina and Megan and Shane came out and saw what I had drawn. They just looked at him and then at me and started laughing. Jack didn't even move. We joked for a while and then decided we needed to go and get some more beer. I looked at Jack on my way out as I was walking past him. I'd never seen him asleep before. And even with all that makeup on, he was still beautiful, with his face like some kind of Sioux Jesus, his hands all spread across his chest. But he just throws all of that in the trash. He's nothing, really. Thank you.